everyone to Drug Trends in Indian Country, Cannabis, and Youth Healing to Wellness Courts, Part 3. Can you believe it? Part 3 already. Today is October 23rd, 2025. Before we get started, this project was supported by OJJDP, this grant award number shown here, Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, Office of Justice Programs, U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and don't necessarily reflect those of the Department of Justice. You could learn more about our funding and other resources by visiting tribalyouth.org. I have the great honor of introducing the presenters today. Judge Pat, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pat Sikehwaptiwa, and I am Hopi. I'm originally from Northern Arizona, but I live in Southern California at the moment, and I am the Tribal Youth Healing to Wellness Court team lead, the national team lead. I suppose I should also tell you I'm a judge. I'm a tribal judge at Hopi and have worked with wellness courts for more than 25 years now. And I will hand off things to Chris Questis to introduce himself.
Thank you, Judge. Chris Questis. I'm a Youth Healing and Wellness Court consultant and also a Tohono descendant. I'm retired law enforcement and spent almost half my life in intervention, prevention, and suppression strategies. I'm a member of the Arizona Narcotics Investigators Association, and I am DRE certified. So thank you.
And my name is Ashley Anderson. You may recognize me from all the other OLAs. I'm the Tribal Youth Healing and Wellness Court TA specialist. I'm also going to be your moderator for today. We also have our lovely Andy in the background, screen sharing and navigating all of the tech. We also have our lovely Aaron Thinelk moderating the chat box for us as well. So if you need anything, please let us know. We're right here with you. At Tribal Law and Policy Institute, we're dedicated to providing free publication resources, comprehensive training, and technical assistance for Native nations and tribal justice systems in pursuit of our vision to empower Native communities to create and control their own institutions for the benefit of all community members now and for future generations. You can learn more about our programs by visiting home.tlpi.org. You could learn also more about Tribal Youth Resource Center there as well. At TYRC, we envision a future where Indigenous youth thrive through traditional lifeways. We hope to enhance the opportunities for Indigenous communities to expand their potential in protecting and nurturing their most sacred asset, the youth. You can learn again more about our programs, what we do as TAs, our resources, and you could also submit a TA request for us to come do a site visit or do a training through tribalyouth.org. All right, Judge Pat, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for always being there to get us organized at the beginning of our OLAs. So we've had a 3-part series, as Chris mentioned, and in part 1, we were really looking at all the different kinds of cannabis, basically the cannabis trends in Indian country and our neighboring communities with youth. So that was fascinating. Chris Questis walked us through all the different ways that cannabis manifests, and then he talked somewhat about the harms with THC as well. And then in part 2, we went more in depth in the harms of THC. And also we looked at testing for THC metabolites and what the issues were around testing. And in this part, we're going to kind of pull back out. The learning objectives for part 3 are to look at the debates around legalized recreational and medical marijuana. Also, we're going to look at how the legalization of marijuana impacts youth in youth healing to wellness courts, both negatively and positively, because there's arguments on both sides. And it's possible both things are the case. And then the third learning objective is what should be the implications for how youth healing to wellness courts set out their eligibility criteria and their policies and procedures in light of all this legalization that we're seeing. Okay, so those are the big picture learning objectives, and I will turn it over to Chris to start us off.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Judge Pat. We want to begin by looking at legalization and prohibitions. It's important to note that as communities legalize legalization, either recreationally or for profit, there's still recognized federal restrictions and prohibitions. And when you're going to have to navigate those when you're working with tribal youth and also working within your community setting, and either supporting or engaging youth and engaging families, and recognize what some of the local challenges may be. We're also going to be talking a little bit more about volume, kind of a little bit of a carryover from our last session where I had some questions emailed to me. So that's what we're going to start with. But as always, we're going to begin with a polling question. So let's move on to our polling question. Awesome. And I have the pleasure of being able to start the first polling question is who are the main suppliers of cannabis, marijuana to the U.S. markets? This is a multiple choice question. 1, Mexican cartels, Chinese or other Asian organized crime groups. 2, cannabis growers and processors operating within the boundaries of the United States. And number 3, tribes. So just take a couple minutes and answer this poll question and kind of get some foundational information on what you could perceive the U.S. market to be. I have a part 2 to this question. How are we doing, Andy?
Doing well. I think we're almost about 70% participated. We can give it about another 30 seconds or so if they'd like to continue answering the question.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, here we go. Drugs trending in your country, part 3. First question is, who are the main suppliers of marijuana or THC, cannabis to the U.S. market? 1, Mexican cartels and Chinese or other Asian organized crime groups, 21%. 2, cannabis growers and processors operating inside the boundaries of the United States, 86% of you said 2. And 0 people answered that tribes were suppliers of cannabis, THC, marijuana. Okay, let's go on to part 2.
Hey, Chris, did you want to answer the
Yes.
question?
Well, the question is part of the presentation, but right now the majority of recreational marijuana comes with what we call licensed growers within the United States, legal growers, and there's 13,259 licensed legal growers that are regulated by the state, but they also have to submit their licenses on the federal level. And those 13,000 plus cannabis growers have produced 2,834 metric tons of cannabis this last fiscal year. So question 2, or part B, which of the following jurisdictions have legalized or decriminalized marijuana? 1, the United States federal government. 2, states and the District of Columbia have legalized or decriminalized it. States and the District of Columbia have legalized it for medical use. 4, some tribes. 5, all of the above. Since you're answering this question, one of the things that came up is that what are we talking about with cost? Cost it fluctuates. From the West Coast, you're looking at $3 a gram. To the East Coast, you're looking at $17 a gram. Now, what is a gram? A gram is basically enough marijuana to make 2 cigarettes or take 2 hits off of a marijuana pipe. That's what a gram is. So and according to what we're being advised is that very shortly the price of marijuana may double. And there's a couple of reasons why that is going to happen. And I'll get into that when we talk about what's happening within the states. So let's see where we're at with our question.
We'll give about another 30 seconds if people would like, if they'd like to finish answering it, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, and the answer to part B which of the following jurisdictions have legalized or decriminalized marijuana? The federal government, 0. Right answer. 2, states and the District of Columbia, 43%. Correct. Individual states have the right to determine whether cannabis, THC, is available for recreational use or for additional usage in the medical use. States and the District of Columbia have legalized for medical use. 21% of you said that. Some tribes, 21%. All of the above, 43%. So, Judge, did you want to?
Sure. So obviously it can't be all of the above because the federal government has not legalized or decriminalized. So the other answers the correct answers are 2, 3, and 4.
Yes. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what side of the coin you are, legal growers or recognized growers are not producing enough marijuana to meet the market. It just simply, they don't have the parameters to be able to have their grows consistently keep up with demand. The West Coast develops too much, grows too much. The Midwest and the East Coast aren't able to, because of course the weather is different. They're not able to grow as much. But one of the challenges is it's still illegal for one business to request product from another business because it comes into the federal violations of interstate trafficking. And that's because there still has the federal government umbrella over the restrictions of distribution and transportation of marijuana. So, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we look at the volume that's currently being developed for the market and what happens when you start reaching out to illicit growers. So thank you for participating. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Chris. That's fascinating.
Okay, so state and tribal legalization of recreational medical marijuana. The U.S. legal cannabis market, which comprises both medical and adult use, is poised to reach $45 billion in sales in 2027. And it's estimated that the legal U.S. market is expected to grow by 12%, reaching by the end of 23, which is already passed, reaching over 29.6 billion. The total global legal cannabis industry is predicted to reach $36.7 billion in 2023, with 80% of the sales coming from the US market. But as I indicated earlier, there's only 12,000 plus legal recognized growers, and only 2,800 metric tons were produced last year. So the demand is much higher and surpasses the availability of the product. So what happens? Unfortunately, what happens is these dealers and sales businesses, they start looking for other opportunities to reach into different markets. And that's why we see, when you go into the market of cannabis, the potential of shaking hands with somebody that may be involved criminally, meaning that you're dealing with either international trafficking organizations or cartel-connected groups that are providing cannabis to make up the difference that is lacking as far as production. So do you know that? It's they don't have that they're involved with criminal organizations on their business cards. And in some instances, there's a veil of a legal business, but potentially you still have to recognize that that's going to be a challenge in the years to come, especially as demand continues to increase. There'll be recognized outlets to be able to access this product. So it's estimated to surpass 45 billion in 2027. That's why we recognize that the market, the demand is going to increase, and so is the associated costs. Next slide, please. So, state and tribal legalization of recreational marijuana continued. According to the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association, 52 tribes directly operate federally approved hemp programs. Dozens have created custom systems to regulate cannabis for both medical and adult use. 26% of tribes are involved in cannabis or hemp programs. So let's look at some of the pros and cons on engaging in the retail market or the recreational market. Tribes are sovereigns, so they have the ability to be able to control their own enterprise, which is an advantage. Cannabis is also, and hemp are both economic development opportunities for tribes that are looking to expand and find revenue streams. This will also increase local jobs and provide a revenue base for the tribal community to either use to develop infrastructure or maybe to seed other businesses or other enterprises. So there are some pros for tribal communities, and that's well and good. But we also need to look at the other side of the argument, and this side of the argument comes from Winona LaDuke, who published the tricky relationship between marijuana and American Indians in 2015. She indicated that there are many states that still have THC and cannabis that are illegal, and tribal legalization is less clear, and the feds still may turn to prosecution dependent upon access, volume, and also keep in mind that a lot of recreational THC and marijuana businesses cannot use the American banking system for the proceeds of their business. So there has to be ways to divert and invest those millions of dollars that are being made. And unfortunately, that's where you find some of these challenges. There are tribes that may not be able to make money because they're unable to expand their market. So it becomes a localized market. And once they meet a saturation point, they're not going to be able to branch out and have another business in a different locale unless they go through all of the regulatory challenges. Selling marijuana off the reservation is very difficult because you have all of the federal restrictions. The other challenges that we're finding is that a lot of the history, a lot of the criminal background of individuals engaged with marijuana sales still exist. For example, is that to be employed by a tribe, you have to have a background check. And there are oftentimes individuals that have a previous arrest record associated with drugs, and it's really difficult to get that employment opportunity. So there's pros and cons to this challenge, and I think a lot of people need to consider those issues when you're dealing with just the concept of let's open up a business for recreational usage, because there are some additional issues that have really become part and parcel to the enterprise of cannabis and THC. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the federal law and the prohibition of the use of your federal funds. I'll just read the brown here. Grantees are prohibited from using federal funds to support the use of any controlled substance, including marijuana, that violates the Controlled Substance Act, regardless of local or state practices or laws. What the heck does this mean? How do we actually carry this out in our tribal court systems? Well, the challenge for tribal judges is that they have to follow the tribal law. So if tribal law has legalized or decriminalized cannabis or marijuana use, or if the tribe has entered into an intergovernmental agreement with a county or a state, and some of their laws are inconsistent with the federal law, then your tribal judges are going to have to follow the local law of the system with respect to probably, we're talking about medical marijuana here. So just for sake of argument, if a tribe has legalized medical marijuana, the judge may interpret the law to protect the rights of an eligible youth participant to use medical marijuana, or at least not to be penalized for exercising the right to do so. And that might be set out in your tribal case law through your tribal appellate court. However, even though it's not often enforced, federal law still considers marijuana use to be illegal. Consequently, the federal government has made it so that your CTAS Purpose Area 8 funding, one of the conditions of your award is that you're prohibited from using your federal funds to support programs or activities that violate the Controlled Substances Act. And if you fail to comply with those award conditions, your CTAS 8 funds can be withheld, your costs may be disallowed or suspended, or the award could be terminated. Now, just because you can't use your CTAS funds with youth who have a medical marijuana card and who are using marijuana doesn't mean that you can't have them in your wellness court if that is what your team and what your tribal law allows or provides for. It's just that you have to use different dollars to support that youth in your wellness court. Also, another federal law requirement is that programs or activities that are funded, your CTAS Purpose Area 8 money funding your wellness court, must ensure that participants are tested for controlled substances, including medical marijuana. So you are going to need to have a testing system for THC in your wellness court. And that's something we haven't stressed a lot in our work with youth healing to wellness courts until we really focused on cannabis. And now we're finding these regs. So it's important to note that. However, OJJDP has interpreted all of this. OJJDP does not interpret the federal prohibition to bar the use of CTAS Purpose Area 8 money for treatment. So if you have, there's so much irony here, if you have youth in your system who are getting treated for cannabis use disorder and some of your CTAS 8 money is going in that direction, that's okay. So it's the other than treatment exception here that you want to focus on. I just want to acknowledge this is super confusing. We've got different jurisdictions with different legal requirements. If you have questions, email us. We're happy to help you sort through it and think it through. It's understandably confusing, and you'll have to strategize around the requirements and the exceptions under your award and the conditions of your award. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Chris. By the way, if we're going too fast, or you want to pitch a question in the chat and slow us down, just say, hey, I'd like to talk about this issue a little longer, and we'll slow down. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Judge. Yeah, that's I think sometimes this material gets a little bit overwhelming, so please use the chat. Eva pointed out that their community uses the proceeds for treatment, and that was kind of the intentional and rehabilitation. That was kind of the initial reasons why many tribes got into recreational marijuana business, was because it actually supported and augmented some of their funding where there was some shortcomings with regards to treatment and rehabilitation, and even being able to support families that were dealing with some substance related issues. So but it was just vetting it out and vetting the process out that I think that there was shortcuts that may or may not have been taken, and then subsequently I think we fall into the challenge of seeing this incredible opportunity financially, and then what happens when we move in that direction. But keep in mind that this landscape is quickly changing. It's quickly changing, and locations and communities are changing their designations for legal usage and recreational usage of cannabis. I just spent some time, I'm not going to say where, in a local tribal casino last week, and at the sports bar, you could actually smoke cannabis as you were there providing your bets for any sporting event. So, 1,068 localities, 40 states, territories, and commonwealths restrict marijuana use in some or all of their smoke-free areas. Of these, 585 localities and 22 states prohibit smoking and vaping recreational medical marijuana in one or more of their venues, like non-hospitality workspaces, restaurants, bars, gambling facilities. But keep that in mind, it's very much a fluid issue right now in many of our communities, because you are recognizing it to be a recreational event, a recreational opportunity. Sporting events, there's locations that not only have smoking sections, but also sections where you can use cannabis and THC. Sports bars, gaming locations. There are even some restaurants that now allow cannabis usage. So, and all these issues are also challenges that communities have to recognize. And remember, when we have that access and we have that saturation, you're going to have our young people challenged with the ability to begin to, at what stage do I use? How much do I use? How is it regulated? Who has it control? It's very interesting to see how many tribes actually have codified THC and cannabis. And in the chat, if you're aware if your tribal community has it codified and in the law and order code, we'd like to know. We'd like to know, because we'd like to see what the code is and see just how much control and how much regulation goes along with the recreational and medical use of THC and cannabis. Next slide, please.
Okay, I think you have me from here on out. So I should have sprinkled more Chris in along the way. He's very entertaining. He's more entertaining than me. So I would like to talk for a moment about youth healing to wellness courts. In order for us to talk about how the legalization of marijuana impacts youth healing to wellness courts, and how youth healing to wellness courts should set out their eligibility criteria and policies and procedures, we have to understand how the youth healing to wellness court model works. So let's start at the beginning and do a basic overview here, in case we've got folks who are not necessarily grantees. So the youth healing to wellness court model is based on the juvenile drug court model, but with cultural and rural tailoring. Each year, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention participates in the CTAS solicitation, which funds Indian country justice systems. And the category for wellness courts for juveniles is called Purpose Area 8. And it's the part of the solicitation that funds youth healing to wellness courts. So we all just need to recall that as part of the requirements under that solicitation, if a tribe receives a CTAS Purpose Area 8 award, it presumes that the tribe is establishing a youth healing to wellness court docket. And that's represented here by the dark blue rectangle. This is a new kind of court docket, or a newer kind of court docket. We're used to having tribal courts that handle child maltreatment, abuse, neglect, or maybe juvenile delinquency. These are the old traditional adversarial court dockets that are represented in the blue, light blue squares at the top here. The new therapeutic dockets are different. They're not primarily adversarial, they're primarily therapeutic. And they have a goal, which is to get young people who are using substances well and to curb their reoffending. The Youth Healing to Wellness Court is an intervention. It's not merely prevention. Although you could think of it as prevention from a youth being coming into the criminal court docket and going to prison. So in a way, it's a kind of prevention, but it is very intervention-y in the sense that you are running youth into the tribal court process. I wanted to shout out to those who have not thought about establishing a youth healing to wellness court to consider it, because it's an alternative to processing youth, just punishing them and throwing them in secure detention and sending them to jail, which we know doesn't stop them from having substance use disorder down the road, or even criminal recidivism down the road. This is a way to route them through a therapeutic court docket and see if we can stop the use, or at least deal with the substance use disorder and treat it early on. Also, it's a way to integrate all the cultural tailoring from the tribe. Okay, go ahead and take me to the next slide, Andy. So as I mentioned, the Youth Healing to Wellness Court model is based on the juvenile drug court model. And while tribes are it's completely within their sovereign authority to modify the model and to integrate culture, I do think it's important to understand how the model was intended to work. So I always cite the analogy, of course you can modify the car, but you would want to know if it was designed to fly like an airplane, or go into outer space like a rocket ship before you modified it. And so I think it's important to understand the juvenile drug court model, and then you can make decisions about how to modify it. So originally, the research shows that the model works best with a certain target population or selected population. And this is youth who have substance use disorder and who are about 14 years or older, who have a moderate to high risk of reoffending. That means they're probably already court involved. And they've not, because Congress targeted money at this area, it had some requirements. And one of them was you cannot use this money for violent offenders. And there's a definition of what a youth violent offender looks like under federal law. So the model today operates with, I would say, 14-year-olds and older adolescents. who are probably court involved and who have substance use at least. And it works best with those who have a substance use disorder. I would just remind folks who attended the first cannabis OLE that we had, online learning event, that the number one illicit drug used by American Indian and Alaska Native adolescents and young adults is, guess what? Cannabis. And so this model is particularly pertinent to our selected group in Indian country. Often also cannabis use is paired with alcohol use. Okay, I have a question from Jennifer. When youth offend, how can you use the cannabis profits for treatment? That's an excellent question for tribal council, right? How are they routing the dollars that come in to deal with, maybe there was a need, you know what? Every single one of our tribes requires more resources for treatment. We all are lacking in fully outlaid service provision in this area. So this is an important question to be asking our tribal council members, and we should raise it with them. Other
Yeah,
thoughts?
it's almost as if tribal council adds like a sin tax to the revenue. They did that. There are some tribes that did that with energy drinks that were requested to sell on tribal lands. They would bring they would let the businesses come in, but they would take a portion of that and use that towards community-based services and also education, especially. So it as Judge Pat indicated, it will have to come from the council level, and they would have to determine how and how much would be regulated, into which program it would go into. But it's very much doable through a tribal resolution if that's what the tribe decides.
Yes, yes, and we should be raising these questions with our tribal councils. Andy, can you take me to the next slide? Thank you, Chris. Okay, so how does a youth healing to wellness court docket work? That dark blue triangle, how is it different? Well, our wellness courts across the country are governed by the tribal key components. There are 10 of them, and they are represented in this figure by the light blue rectangles. And they basically include these elements. To make the model work, you need to be able to have case plans and case management with goals for youth. You need to have random alcohol and drug testing. Your wellness court docket will also have phases that include treatment, youth healing to wellness court supervision requirements, and also cultural tailoring. You also have a team, interdisciplinary team of people working with youth that include the treatment and cultural people, but also the courtside people. And they meet weekly or a little less frequently to review the progress and to apply incentives or recommend incentives if they're doing well, service adjustments if they need help, sanctions if they need a sanction. And these are followed by weekly or a little less frequently status hearings, youth healing to wellness court status hearings, where the judge acts like a coach. And with the recommendations from the team, applies incentives or sanctions. It can also be the case that you choose to do all sanctioning through case management meetings. And then finally, the phases that have all of these requirements in it, if you look at the yellow box to the left here, you can include all kinds of cultural activities, skills building, mentoring, history, support groups, tribally adapted evidence-based practices and treatments can be part of the phases as well. I'm hearing money, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching when I look at the yellow box, and I'm thinking about the comments from Jennifer about how do you get the money to pay for some of these things. So that is an excellent question. Having the money helps you adapt the model to your culture, history, priorities. It's an important question. Okay, let me just say a few more things. When a participant, a youth participant, agrees to participate in a youth healing to wellness court, they agree to be tested for alcohol and drugs. They also agree to be subject to incentives, service adjustments, and sanctions. And sanctions are small. It's not like you're throwing someone in jail for 30 days or even any jail at all. Sanctions can also be the withholding of incentives. Um, Under the model, a youth who tests positive for measurable THC metabolites is subject to treatment or service adjustments first, and then graduated sanctions once it's clear that they've passed the detection window. And we talked a lot about that in the second online learning event. And if you need a copy of that, let us know because we talk in detail about testing. Okay, so for those of you who are already operating youth healing to wellness courts, you have some familiarity with the model and this is old news. For the folks who are thinking about applying for CTAS Purpose Area 8, last year the solicitation set the deadline for March. So you should start thinking about it now. And we're hoping to offer some online learning events to prep you if you're going to do an application in January. And I hope you'll think about applying and feel free to email us if you have questions. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So it's going to be important to consider a number of factors when we think about how legalization is impacting your youth healing to wellness courts and also how you should set out your criteria and your policies and procedures. So this is a little bit nuanced. So let's talk about the factors, and these are debates also. It's not all settled. Okay, let's do a polling question though for a moment. Let's jump to the polling question. Just take a break from all the substance here. Okay, so we're asking your opinion here. And it's okay to have an opinion. Which of the following do you think are good reasons for permitting the use of medical marijuana in a youth healing to wellness court? Number one, the use of medical marijuana should not be permitted in a youth healing to wellness court, given the related cannabis and alcohol addiction risks. Or number two, medical marijuana users are less likely to have alcohol and other drug problems. 3, consuming addictive substances for recreational purposes and consuming prescribed medication are typically treated differently by courts and legislation. 4, prohibiting prescribed medication use is rarely a provision of probation, which is also known as community supervision. 5, it may be unethical or illegal to force youth to choose between youth healing to wellness court participation and taking physician recommended treatment for their illness. 6, some state statutes allow probationers to use medical marijuana, but enable courts to prohibit recreational marijuana consumption. And I should say, a lot of youth healing to wellness courts actually do put their youth on probation before they let them into the youth healing to wellness court. So they're technically on probation and the probation laws apply to them. So it's kind of a little nuanced detail there that's relevant to youth healing to wellness courts. Okay, and it's okay to have an opinion that's not even on this list and type it into the chat and we can talk about it for a minute. So the original question, what do you think? Which of the following are good reasons for permitting the use of medical marijuana in a youth healing to wellness court? Provocative question, different opinions. And Andy, you let me know how we're doing on the time.
Okay, we'll do that.
This one may take a little longer because it's so wordy.
I'm not quite to 50% complete yet, so we'll let folks have a little bit more time to read and choose their answers.
Okay. And don't be surprised or don't feel like you're alone if you think, what? You can let people in wellness court use medical marijuana, because I think that is also the controversy.
Pat, maybe about 15 more seconds and then we can share the results.
Okay, great. Okay, so it looks like most of you, although not more than half of you, feel that the use of medical marijuana should not be permitted in a youth healing to wellness court, given the addiction risks. And then the second most, I guess it's kind of like a opinion polling. The second most held opinion is some state statutes allow probationers to use medical marijuana, but enable courts to prohibit recreational marijuana consumption. That is true. And then what runs in number 3, 27% consuming addictive substances for recreational purposes and consuming prescribed medication are typically treated differently by courts and legislation. That is also true. That's a true statement. You might be interested to note that some of the research holds number 2 to be true. Medical marijuana users are less likely to have alcohol and other drug problems as compared to recreational users. And I think part of the reason may be that a lot of older people are starting to use medical marijuana for inflammation and other symptom management, and they are not necessarily substance use disordered. They are using it like a drug. So that's an interesting fact in the adult research. I will say this is all up for debate, especially in terms of what you think your jurisdiction should do in its policy. And teams are having these discussions all around the country, and each team is deciding what their approach is. Okay, let's see what we have in the chat. So Janae was asking, it's really dependent on phase 1, I guess. Is that, Janae, is that responding to another comment, or is that an original comment? Complete abstinence or harm reduction. Maybe she can't. Maybe we don't open
I was
it
going
up.
to say, Pat, it may be that she was referencing also the polling question.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to hold off answering Janae's questions because the PowerPoints that are upcoming start to talk about the very thing she's pointing out. So hold on to that thought, Janae, and let's move forward to the next slide. Okay. So the first thing to note when we think about what our policy should be with respect to marijuana or cannabis use, the first factor to note is that right now, most juvenile drug treatment courts, they prohibit the use of other legal yet intoxicating substances like alcohol. So I know in Indian country, alcohol use can actually be a controlled substance, but outside of Indian country, not so much. Alaska might be an exception. Um, but even so, your youth healing to wellness court or juvenile drug treatment court participants are often required not to use substances that will test positive, like a poppy seed or alcohol, even though it's legal in the jurisdiction. So you kind of hold that at the back of your mind that the conditions of wellness court participation can require abstaining from using even legal substances in the first place. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So as Janae brought up, there is a movement of advocates who are arguing for harm reduction approaches. What is that exactly? So there's sort of three ways that you can think about harm reduction. One is sometimes it may actually help a person to substitute medical marijuana for a more harmful substance, like an opiate, fentanyl, for example. Better alive than dead, right? And so the treatment providers in a particular jurisdiction may argue for the substitution argument, the harm reduction argument under number one. Under number two, some argue that you're managing symptoms and improving quality of life. If you were in our first session, we had a little piece on research with irritable bowel syndrome and other ailments where they are using THC and CBD for reducing inflammation, and it does reduce inflammation. So a person may have a medical need, and a doctor may be prescribing medical marijuana to meet that need. And they may be managing symptoms to improve the quality of life. And then number three is a lot what Chris was talking about earlier, that if you can keep someone in the legal drug market and keep them out of the illegal or illicit drug market, you reduce harm, because legalized or regulated medical marijuana follows standardized procedures. Theoretically, there can be dosage control. There may be reduced risk of contaminants or polysubstances. And we'll have to ask Chris this question. Chris, are they seeing polysubstances in the cannabis that you get in a cannabis shop that's regulated? I'm curious about that one myself.
It's not necessarily what you're obtaining at the shop. It's the person that cuts it again. Say, for example, they're having a party, a weekend party, and someone actually goes out and purchases and this was happening in some of the tribal communities we were working with. They would buy a bag, say a $50 bag, and they would actually cut it more and then enhance the dosage by adding a secondary product to it. And a lot of times that secondary product was a poly substance, and that's where we found and we heard of the tragedies of youth overdosing from marijuana usage because it was laced with fentanyl. But as we saw with part one, if those of you remember, they're dipping marijuana, cannabis cigarettes in malt liquor, in liquid heroin. I mean, it's amazing the different substances that are now being used to increase the toxicity of the THC. So it can be pretty much anything, but that there is that increased risk for young people when you have someone that is engaging in a secondary market as opposed to a vetted recreational market. So that's the answer to the question.
Yeah, it's nuanced, but that's extremely important. That's why we bring Chris in to talk about street drugs. And when we say street drugs, we mean the illicit market or the illegal market for drugs, because now there's no regulation, right? And nobody controls what's happening to those drugs or what they're mixed with or whether they really are what they say it is. And the street drugs problem is a huge problem Because those drugs, I bet, are cheaper than the drugs you get in the cannabis shop.
Oh, absolutely. And remember, this is an extremely competitive market. And any way or opportunity you can see you can find to find a foothold into that profit margin range. Remember, you're looking at an 800% profit margin. And anybody that can tap into that develops a revenue stream. And there's not really a concern whether that revenue stream is from tribal youth or from individuals that are using it recreationally for like a weekend event or things of that nature. So there's just so much margin, and that's why we see so many of these illicit enterprises engaging in the process, because it's beneficial to them. And that's what we need to be cognizant of, where it comes from, who's close to us, who's engaging, what we're looking for as far as a network for obtaining. There's a lot of really difficult challenges that need to be navigated with regards to even recreational access. So thank you, Judge.
Yep. Thank you, Chris. So that brings us to our last bullet under number 3. And for those juvenile drug treatment courts that do allow medical marijuana, they require that it be attached to a medical professional. In other words, the youth has to demonstrate that they have a doctor they're working with. That doctor knows they're in wellness court or drug court, knows they have a medical marijuana card and what it is for, and that doctor can have releases with the team members to discuss their progress. So there's some medical supervision or involvement if there is a medical marijuana card. And of course, if this is not the illicit market, this is the medical marijuana regulated market with the involvement of a medical professional. So as you can see, these harm reduction approaches, it's like a spectrum of strategies here. And the thinking is that you meet people who use drugs where they're at, and you address the conditions of use along with the use itself, because you can make their life better and safer if you have really good policies here, and hopefully access to medical professionals as well. Okay, so this may be this may be quite controversial in your part of the country or in your jurisdiction. We provide you with the arguments so you can take it back to your team and have a debate. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to start marching through the different considerations or factors for the policies in your wellness court. And this is the first one. Should youth healing to wellness courts adopt different policies for medical and recreational marijuana use? And these actually are the statements from your polling question that you just had. There are addiction risks for consuming THC or marijuana. There's no doubt about that. And not just for cannabis use disorder, there's addiction risk for substance use disorder. So if you are actually assessing that disorder in a youth in your program, they should not have a medical marijuana card probably. And you need to discuss with your team how to make sure you've done those assessments and that you're interpreting them correctly, and that you're working with the treatment provider to handle that youth's restrictions or requirements. You should have a different policy. I already know the answers to some of these here. You should have different policies for medical marijuana and recreational marijuana for sure, because you're working with people who are under the age of 18 in most cases. It is still illegal in, I think, all jurisdictions for someone under 18 to recreationally use marijuana. So the recreational use can be prohibited outright. The question usually is whether medical use should be permitted with conditions. And so that's the first question you should face. Pull out your policies and procedures, see what they say about prescription drugs, because that could be a medical marijuana use. See what they say about recreational marijuana. See if it says nothing. And sort of make a mental note of that. Maybe you need to develop policies that are not actually there. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Number 2, must youth healing to wellness courts adhere to the laws of their jurisdiction? What if your tribe makes it legal for youth to use marijuana medically? So we know that judges in your system, they have to follow your law. That's their whole job, is to apply your law to your people in your jurisdiction. And so they're going to have to adhere to the laws of the jurisdiction. However, we're finding, even with the state governments and courts, that most states do not have clear statutory language on whether individuals under community supervision, meaning under probation, are permitted to use recreational marijuana, whether these activities would be a violation of probation. And at the same time, many of these state laws allow people on probation to use marijuana medically. So the law is not clear. It's in conflict, even within the same jurisdiction. And appellate courts across the country have been issuing really divergent decisions on the use of medical marijuana if someone is on probation. So recall that I told you that in many jurisdictions, people in wellness court or juvenile drug courts, they're on probation. So the probation laws will apply to them as well. So it is unclear even legally whether or not, what the law is. Who decides it for you guys? Your appellate court. Your judges in your system will ultimately decide what your rule is for where you live. Okay, let me just stop there for a second. Are there any questions or comments so far? Chris, do you have any thoughts? I asked.
Yeah, I wanted to add real quickly because I'm sure that people are wondering. The average cost of the medical marijuana card is about $150. And you have to go through a background check, and you also have to have a doctor's permission to receive and apply for the card. There is an underground market for the medical marijuana card as well, even for youth. And that underground market is between 50 to 60 bucks. It depends on whether or not they have the capability to replicate the acceptable card within your state. So just keep that in mind, that yeah, there's a cost associated. You have to have a doctor's permission, but there is an underground market for a medical marijuana use card.
So teams are going to have to check. They're going to have to do their due diligence, a background check.
Absolutely.
The card is legit. Yes, more checking. Let's see, anyone else? Erin's just pointing out that at TYRC, we do code and policy review for you. If you want us, even you want us to look at your policies and procedures manual on this topic, we can do it for you. Put in a TA request through the website. We can also look at your codes or do the combo review if you need us to do that. We're happy to do it. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the third question is, how might a youth healing to wellness court's marijuana policy affect the composition of the whole cohort of youth in the healing to wellness court? It can, and you need to think this through as a team, because and a youth who wants to keep using medical marijuana because it's relieving symptoms of some medical problem, they may be discouraged from participating in a healing to wellness court if they know they're going to be sanctioned for positive THC tests. And so they will self-select out. They might rather go to juvenile detention instead of participate in a therapeutic wellness court. And so, and often these youth may be using other drugs too. So it can have effect on your composition of who gets into the wellness court, and you want to make sure that you intend that outcome. Also, another problem is that if you permit some of the people, some of the youth in your wellness court to use marijuana with a medical marijuana card, it can affect the operation of the whole cohort of youth because they see that someone's getting treated differently when they have a positive test result. And it can create a slippery slope. It can create a slippery slope and that all the rest of them run to go get a medical marijuana card. It can create a slippery slope in that they feel like they're not being treated fairly. It's an unfair process. So if you do in your system decide to exempt medical marijuana use from total abstinence, you need to have really clear rules about medical marijuana. You need to make sure they're communicated to everybody. And you need to have a way to double check that someone is legitimately getting cards, like Chris said. You know, check that process and have a process for making sure that their cards are legitimate. And then make it clear to everyone that medical use is the exception, not the norm. Okay, so not so simple. Let's go to the next slide and talk about the fourth factor. So if some participants are allowed to use marijuana for medical conditions, how does the team ensure that they are not abusing marijuana? And this is a more subtle question about, you know, let's say your doctor said you only need to take one pill to treat your condition. And now we find through testing they're taking 3 pills instead of 1. Is it possible to test for that with THC? And the answer is no, unfortunately. Are they using too much beyond what the doctor says they need? So that is a real challenge in ensuring that youth are not abusing their medical marijuana. So, of course, yes, you must test for THC in your wellness court. And this is random and frequent urine testing. We do know that the detection window will probably take most of your phase 1. You won't be able to tell if they have new use, even though you're testing all through phase 1. By phase 2, you probably can. However, that still won't tell you if they're using too much. They might have permission to use a certain amount, but you won't be able to tell if they're using too much. You're going to have to rely on your treatment providers and the doctor behind their medical marijuana to figure that out from week to week or month to month. So this is going to require some attention if you allow medical marijuana in your wellness court. Okay, any questions or comments? Chris, do you have a thought?
Yes, there are some advantages and some progress that's been made with testing. I do know that there currently is a what's called surface test and trace amount kits, where you can actually brush the clothing of an individual and determine if they have trace amounts of, which would basically prove that they're in close proximity of THC or cannabis. It depended upon what's regulated for your participant. But there are some, and I'll put the name of the company that has the surface test kits, but it also can be used to detect polysubstances or trace amounts of fentanyl. So just keep that in mind. And if you do have, and you're in an area that does have a significant amount of usage, it's not a bad idea to kind of layer your test mechanisms. And there are different types of tests that can be made available. There's the standard easy at-home test for parents, and there are the ones that are more sophisticated that are used by medical professionals. So it's all going to depend upon your restrictions, your the youth that you're working with, and just the potency of the product that they have access to. So I'll put the name of that surface test kit in the chat.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so let's talk about we'll use our last 5 minutes to talk about the approaches and policy examples that you have a choice to pick from. Can you go to the next slide, please, Andy? And you can go to the next slide. So there's basically 4 approaches. The first is the abstinence-based approach, which quite a number of juvenile drug treatment courts follow. That is the abstinence-based approach requires participants to completely abstain from marijuana use, even medical marijuana. So some jurisdictions are just saying no marijuana at all if you're in the wellness court. The second approach is called the tolerance-based approach. This would allow participants to use marijuana regardless of their reason. So basically, it just treats marijuana as a legal substance that is not prohibited. No jurisdiction follows this approach at the moment. However, there are arguments for this approach, which are probably not feasible for you if your only funding is CTAS Purpose Area 8. But it is an approach. The third approach is called the adaptive opt-in approach. Some jurisdictions follow this. All Rise or NADCP recommends this approach. It's the approach which in general prohibits marijuana use, but then allows a subset of participants who have demonstrated a medical necessity to use marijuana to use it. And to the right here, I give you the NADCP rule. This is from 2010, and it was with respect to smoking marijuana. So it's old, it's out of date. But they had the rule that it is permitted if you have convincing and demonstrable evidence of a medical necessity presented by a competent physician who has expertise in addiction psychiatry or addiction medicine. We do not have that unicorn in Indian country. I can almost guarantee it. So the rule is not very workable for us. It sounds good. It's a little out of date because marijuana now comes in many forms that are not just smoked marijuana. So I share the rule with you to see where they were going, but it clearly needs to be updated. Okay, and then the final approach is the adaptive opt-out approach. This is where, in general, you allow participants to use marijuana, but you take corrective actions if its use is harming a participant's recovery or health. So I suppose there you would be assessing for cannabis use disorder or any indicia that maybe a youth is going to have a problem with substance use disorder. And then you have rules about restricting the use. So you have 4 choices here for approach. Clearly, most are following 2 and 3. Most other jurisdictions are following 2 and 3. Any questions or comments about these different approaches? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. All right. I think for time purposes, I'm going to end it there. We do have some examples of the laws. Can you click forward, Andy? I'll just show them what slide it's on. You're going to get a copy of these slides after this is over. Keep going. This one, slide 34. So to the right here, you see some language from different jurisdictions. Youth may not possess or consume controlled substances under any circumstances. That's one approach. Another is if you choose to use medical marijuana, you're not eligible to participate. That's another approach. The third, the court does not endorse the use of marijuana. But there's an exception on a case-by-case basis if there's evidence of medical necessity. That's the All Rise NADCP rule. And then the fourth, the ingestion of marijuana will be monitored by probation officers. You have to present evidence from your physician, but you're still under supervision. So these are some different language alternatives from different jurisdictions. Um, okay, I think I'm going to end it there. So this is an area where the law is not settled, where federal and state laws inconsistent, where there is a lot of debate about what the right policies should be. Um, I guess where I would settle as a tribal judge in my own jurisdiction is that, of course, we're sovereign. We get to decide about weighing the costs and benefits of cannabis in our jurisdiction and with our youth. Um, Given that it is quite harmful for adolescents with their developing brains, we might be more restrictive with youth and adolescents. Also, given that so much of our funding comes from federal dollars and there's limitations on how we can use it with cannabis, that will also inform our policies in our wellness courts, I think, in our tribal jurisdictions. Gaming tribes will have more choices because they have more dollars. Um, I would go back to your team, your judge, and have this conversation with them and, share the recording for this online learning event with them. Put in a TA request to have us take a look at your code and your policies, and we're happy to meet with your team and see where you want to go. Chris, you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, this is very much a build it as you go strategy because we do understand that some of you are being reactive to uh, the tribe taking on recreational marijuana sales and all of the associated challenges with that. So you're having to build a responsive strategy, but it's best to be able to work as a group, as a collective, with your team. We're available to provide anything from basic awareness training all the way into code revision and looking at all the different variables that you may need and to develop to begin to be responsive to these issues. We do know based on history and based on the existing trends that we're going to see enhanced potency and we're going to see expanded availability. So that's not going to go away. We also recognize that the market is very popular and that it's the potential for youth and involvement and usage is there. It's present and it's going to increase. So I think we need to, begin the dialogue and see what we have as far as options and what we can turn to be able to be responsive and use this opportunity of Youth Healing and Wellness Court for opportunities for intervention, redirection, support, treatment, and rehabilitation. And I think that's kind of that was the goal and the objective of these 3 sessions. It took us a long time to say it, but that's basically what the message is.
Yeah. And thank you for hanging out with us all through all 3. Don't run away yet, though. Ashley has a little bit that she wanted to cover with you before you leave today.
Well, thank you, Pat and Chris. We do have a number of resources that you can reference. Again, you will get this PowerPoint and the recording. For being here today, also, you'll get all of the 3 PowerPoints and the recordings. So if you missed part 1 or part 2, that's okay. You could go back and watch those as well. And then use this PowerPoint to inform your team, just as Judge Pat was showing us on slide 34, implications and what it means and considerations. So please use it. We're here to help you, just as Erin has been putting in the chat. We are TAs. We're here to guide this journey with you, even if it's very challenging. Next slide, please. We would ask you, or we are asking you to do an evaluation. This does help us with our funding, and also it informs us what we could do better for next time. So go ahead and take the survey. It's just a few questions, and I'll give you a few minutes here to take that. And Andy, how are we doing with the polling?
We've got a little over 50% who have participated, so maybe give them just a little bit longer.
Perfect.
Actually, if you want to
Thanks.
continue wrapping up, I'm just probably thinking the same thing. If you want to continue wrapping up, I can continue to leave this survey up and people can continue to work on it, finish it as we close.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. And thank you, Janae, and for all of those who were engaged today and chatting and navigating this hard work. It's also great to see you all again, actually. Thank you, Timothy, Janae, and Eva. So many wonderful names I see in the chat. And Andy, if you could move us to the next slide, please. You could visit us at tribalyouth.org or give us a call. We do want to walk you through all of this, if it be your code or just having a conversation, please reach out to us. Thank you again for serving our youth. They're really going to benefit from your hard work. And so thank you, everyone. Take good care of yourselves, get some water, some protein, go for a walk. It's sunny out where I am today, so I might be doing the same. Thank you, everyone.